Have you ever felt like your life was meant for something more, but you just couldn't see the path? Let's talk about a man whose entire life was a journey of destiny, struggle, and incredible faith. A story set in motion by God long before he even understood his purpose. This is the story of Moses. Moses was born during a terrifying time for the Hebrew people in Egypt. The powerful Pharaoh, fearing their growing numbers, had given a cruel order. Every newborn Hebrew boy was to be killed. In an act of desperate love, Moses' mother placed her baby in a basket woven from reeds and set him afloat on the Nile River, trusting his fate to the water and to God. Miraculously, the basket wasn't swept away into oblivion. Instead, it was found by Pharaoh's own daughter. She felt compassion for the crying baby, pulled him from the water, and decided to adopt him as her own. She named him Moses, which means drawn out of the water. So, a boy born to be a slave grew up as a prince of Egypt. He was raised in the splendor and luxury of the royal palace, educated in the ways of the most powerful empire on earth. But despite his privileged upbringing, Moses never forgot his roots. He knew he was a Hebrew, and his heart ached for his people. One day, he saw an Egyptian mercilessly beating a Hebrew slave. In a flash of rage, Moses intervened and killed the Egyptian. Panic set in. Fearing the Pharaoh's wrath, he fled from the only home he had ever known, escaping deep into the wilderness of Midian. For the next 40 years, Moses lived a life of obscurity. The prince became a shepherd, a humble man living far from the courts of power. He married, had children, and settled into a quiet, simple existence. It must have felt like his old life was a distant dream. But it was here, in this lonely, desolate place, that God was preparing him. One day, while tending his flock near a mountain, Moses saw something impossible. A bush engulfed in flames, yet not burning up. As he drew closer, a voice called to him from the fire. It was the voice of God. God told Moses that he had seen the suffering of the Israelites in Egypt and heard their cries for freedom, and he had chosen Moses, the runaway shepherd, to be their deliverer. Moses was terrified. He was filled with doubt. "Who am I to do this?" he asked. He told God he was a terrible speaker, clumsy with words, and completely unworthy of such a massive task. But God's promise was simple and powerful. "I will be with you." To help him, God sent his brother, Aaron, who was a gifted speaker, to be his voice. With a heart full of both fear and a flicker of faith, Moses returned to Egypt. He and Aaron stood before the mighty Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, and delivered God's command, "Let my people go." Pharaoh laughed. He refused. His heart hardened. And so began a series of 10 devastating plagues, a divine showdown between God and the gods of Egypt. The Nile River turned to blood. Darkness smothered the land, and in the final, heartbreaking plague, the firstborn son in every Egyptian household died. Only then, in his grief and defeat, did Pharaoh finally release the Israelites. Their freedom was short-lived, as the massive crowd of men, women, and children fled towards the wilderness. Pharaoh changed his mind. He gathered his army, his chariots thundering across the desert in pursuit. The Israelites were trapped. Before them lay the vast Red Sea, and behind them, the vengeful Egyptian army was closing in. It was a moment of pure terror and desperation. But Moses, trusting God, raised his staff over the water. In an awe-inspiring display of power, God parted the sea, creating a path of dry land right through the middle of the towering walls of water. The Israelites hurried across to safety. As the last one reached the other side, the Egyptian army charged into the seabed. Moses raised his staff again, and the walls of water crashed down, swallowing the entire army. They were truly free. In the wilderness, Moses' role shifted from liberator to leader. He guided this newly freed, but often rebellious, nation. He mediated their disputes, listened to their complaints, and taught them how to live as God's people. On the holy peak of Mount Sinai, God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, a set of divine laws that would become the moral foundation for generations to come. Moses spoke with God face to face, as a man speaks to a friend. Yet he constantly struggled with the people cast out and their tendency to turn away from the very God who had saved them. Moses led Israel for 40 long years, wandering through the wilderness. But because of a single moment of disobedience, a moment where he struck a rock in anger instead of speaking to it as God commanded, Moses himself was not allowed to enter the promised land. From the top of a mountain, God showed him the beautiful, fertile land that was to be his people's home. And there, in sight of the promise, Moses died, a faithful servant to the very end. Moses never wore a king's crown or sat on a throne, yet his impact on history is immeasurable. He was a man who once fled in fear, but returned as a leader who learned to trust God completely. His life is a powerful reminder that true greatness isn't found in status, power, or eloquence. It begins in humility, in obedience, and in having the faith to answer the call, no matter how unworthy we feel. Thanks for watching. If this story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories of faith and history. See you next time.